If you could take something that was natural and calorie-free, that made food taste better, sex more enjoyable, helped with sleep, made music even more amazing, and crappy movies interesting, would you take it? I'm told that such a creature actually exists. I'm Matt, and on this episode of Infants on Thrones, we're going to be talking about herb. But ganja, the chronic, weed, pot, marijuana. Randy, John, and myself are joined by two veritable experts. Jed Johnson, a part owner of a marijuana dispensary and grow operation in Arizona, and our favorite pothead, Micah Nickolaisen. They're going to talk to us a little bit about the herb and about some of the issues that are arising, both politically and socially, related to this controversial thing that comes from the earth.
Because I got high. Go to the next.
This is Infants on Thrones. The philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the core. All right, so I've got John. You've not met Jed. You've not met Jed Johnson. He's here in the Phoenix group, and we invited him on because he is a part owner of a grow facility and a dispensary here in Arizona.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hey, John.
Hi.
Hey.
And Micah, you know.
Yep.
Hey, John. Hey, Matt. Hey, Jed.
He's on because he's a pothead.
Yeah, I'm, yeah. Yep, that's pretty much it. Those are my credentials.
And
very good.
Micah's apparently willing to, he's an, what did you call yourself, an unashamed pothead?
Yeah, an unashamed pothead. Yeah. Very proud of my affinity for this miraculous plant.
And I guess I'm from a country where we just elected a guy whose part of his platform was legalizing marijuana. So right now Canada is in a situation, I think, where it's like no enforcement. So there's just no enforcement at all,
right,
anywhere. But then it's going to be the government has said that they're going to go through and figure out how to just legalize it.
So marijuana. It does seem a little. It still has this. There's this taboo about the drug, talking about it, and it still has this. It seems to have this stigma. It's been like this sea change just over the course of the past 2 years. It seems where to see the number of dispensaries and to learn about the number of people that are very open about having a card in Arizona is the same as a prescription, but has been just amazing to me.
Yeah, it's been shocking to me for sure. I mean, my background, everyone in my family is still totally, in the church, and I have 7 siblings, and every single one of them, has their own opinion on it, and it was so taboo for so long to talk about it, and I even got my mom to try it. She's got this problem with she's got like sciatica, and she's really she's in a ton of pain. She's got like shooting pains down the back of her leg, and nothing helped. She got surgery, nothing helped. It was about 3 or 4 months of really bad pain. And so I got her to even try that. And I was just, when I tell my friends that, the ones that are out of the church that grew up with me in this, and their minds were blown too. But it's fascinating to see the acceptance for sure.
So, which is your mom still in when she's?
Yeah, she's absolutely still in the church. Yeah,
and still willing to. Even with that, she was willing to try.
So she wasn't trying. Yeah, she wasn't willing to smoke anything, and she actually was. And I was a little nervous to give her any edibles. So I actually, oddly enough, there was a really nice slim line vape pen. And it's just vapor, it's, and so she actually tried that. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now I'm even more jealous of you, Jed. Jeez, man. You got your mom to smoke pot?
Yeah, you wouldn't believe it, man. I swear I was in the living room at my house with my sister there watching, and I demonstrated. I said, "Oh yeah, this is how you do it. Just like it was nothing. I just took a little bit. I just said, okay, this is it. You suck it in, you pull it in for a second, you let it out. And I gave it to her, and it was surreal. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what was happening. I looked at my wife and I was just like, can you believe this happened? Just like what? Yeah, it was
That's crazy.
It was amazing.
Sorry, I'm trying to add Randy.
And it's also, while you're adding Randy, it also seems like, and I'm new to telling people about this, that I'm in the industry, but I mean, 95% of the people I tell that I'm in the industry, they're all just fascinated by it. They're just, and they all immediately, and it may just be people with face-to-face conversation, don't want to be, conflict what you're saying and things, but man, it seems like everyone's so interested in it and have all sorts of questions and totally accept it. So
yeah, but you're right. That could be like the girl that tells you she's a stripper. You're like, oh, I'll bet you get nice discounts on shoes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, cash only game. Oh, great. That's
right. You gotta save a lot of taxes.
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's just become so much less stigmatized, and I don't have any relatives that have tried it yet, but I know here in Mesa that I've heard about temple workers having medical cards. And so, I think even within mainstream Mormonism, it's, but that's why it's interesting, with the church recently coming out with its, new position about medical marijuana in Utah. How is that going to affect, Mormons in states where there already is medical marijuana? How is that going to affect things culturally?
Yeah.
Right.
And, Senator Madsen's bill in Utah is essentially the same bill that passed in 2010 in Arizona. So, I mean, so how are people going to be able to justify that? I don't know. It's kind of interesting story, actually. I was going to look at another dispensary's grow operation, and come to find out the guy who runs the place is active LDS guy. The guy in the industry, they call him the Mormon. And I was shocked. I was like, hey, no, whoa, I'm the Mormon. Relax. I'm the Mormon here. Come on. And but I couldn't believe it that he was, fully active. And I asked him, I said, how do you justify this whole thing? How can you? And he's just said, oh, the church has never come out and directly said against, that against medical, it's legal, so it's fine. And, so I wonder, I was very interested in his position after that. So I got to call him tomorrow and see what he thinks after the church said that.
But Jed, your family that are believers, when you told them what you were going to do for a living, or that you were changing jobs and working for a dispensary and a grow facility, what was their reaction?
Yeah. So that's a good question. They didn't like it, or my parents really, really didn't like it at first. And my brothers and sisters all various reactions. But yeah, my mom and dad, it was a long time before they even accepted that that's what it was. Cause I bought into the dispensary 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so they've known about it for a little longer than that. Actually, funny story. My parents didn't know anything about my transition or where I was at, in regards to the church. And my daughter one day was playing with my money clip, and all my cards fall out. This is like a year and a half or 2 years ago. All my cards fall out, and one of them is my DA card, my dispensary agent card for the dispensary. My mom picks it up and looks at it and just was shocked. She didn't know that I had drank. She didn't know anything about anything, and so she saw it, and we had this long conversation that sparked this whole thing. But
outed by your money clip.
Outed. Hey, Randy.
Hey, how's it going?
That's always the way.
Yeah, it's the best way.
Right.
Yeah, so they did not react well to it at first, but slowly they became more accepting. If you send that TED talk of the forget the guy's name, but they're the CBD for the epileptic patient, the young girl. If you send them that, man, their hearts soften pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you not care about epileptic people?
Yeah.
It's funny with my relatives. They know I have a medical card here in Arizona, but they're always more worried about drinking, and things like that. Like they think that's much more concerning than the cannabis use, and so. And that honestly kind of surprised me. In fact, I tried to hide it from them for quite a long time. But their hearts have been softened as well.
So, who's the best equipped to just teach us a quick 101 thumbnail lesson on cannabis? Marijuana
Micah.
101.
Micah.
Oh no. Okay. I'm going to try really hard. You can, anybody else feel free to fill in the blanks.
Well, I actually want to ask just a quick question. I'm in a state where all of it's legal in Colorado. And one of the rumors that was going around the rumor mill, and this is a relatively new experiment in the state. And by the way, counties can override the state decision. I currently live in a county where only rec is legal. I learned that.
Wait, medical? Only medical is legal?
Only medical is legal in my county. It's a very Christian county.
I didn't know that. I
didn't know that either until I tried to help a friend out. It wasn't for me. I'm a healthcare provider. I do not use that stuff. But one of the rumors that was going around is that the Mexican drug cartel was harassing the dispensaries because they were cutting into their profit here with the recreational marijuana, which it just doesn't make sense to me because I think it's cheaper to buy it on the street than it is at a rec dispensary. But I was wondering, Jed, is that something that you've encountered at all?
No, not anything direct from any criminal organization, but I'm sure that we're cutting into profits. There's no doubt about it. People that used to purchase illegally are more than happy to pay a little bit extra. But absolutely, is there still in the legal market? Totally, and they're still making money. But we've just cut into their profits. I'm sure.
But you're not hearing from other people in the industry that somebody's coming looking for taxes or something like that. That's been I've heard the same rumor as well, Randy, and I think it's been more where I heard it was just a law enforcement officer was speculating that if this happens, you can expect the cartels that they won't just go away quietly, that they're going to somehow work in to these with these or the dispensaries and the legal dispensaries and start requiring taxes or something.
Yeah, like they used to do back in during Prohibition days. They'd throw a rock through your window.
Oh yeah,
and say, "Hey, it looks like you need some protection."
That's what they say on The Simpsons. You're getting that from The Simpsons.
No, I got it from The Untouchables, actually.
The Untouchables. Yeah. Well, that's why though. If this thing happens though, big time, like all across Canada all at once through however the government's going to do it, then it's very hard for a cartel to respond universally throughout the whole country. I know that, for example, in Uruguay, it's legal now, and in doing it, when they did that, the government took control of all of the dispensaries and also, I think, even the growing of it and everything like that. And so, as a result of that, in Uruguay, not only does the government get all of the revenues from it, but because people are, able to tell, okay, they don't have to be scared about the product or the shadiness or the illegality of it. People from Argentina, from Buenos Aires, are just constantly going to Montevideo to buy all their pot. So which has obviously therefore been win-win-win for Uruguay.
I once read the opinion of a former judge in California. And he was a big proponent for what you're talking about, John. He basically said what you could do is exactly what Uruguay did, but also they were able to, theoretically undercut all of the, in terms of price and availability, undercut all of the illegal drug operations from the cartels and places like that. And you would effectively get rid of all marijuana-related crime, all of the trafficking, and that would cut down on human trafficking. And, he explained all of these positive repercussions, aside from the obvious things like the tax revenue and stuff like that.
I expect they'll do that here in Canada because, for example, alcohol in Ontario is entirely managed by it's the Liquor Control Board of Ontario is what it's called. We call it the LCBO. So you only can buy liquor and beer and everything like that in the LCBO, and it's hugely expensive, compared to the United States, and stuff like that. And that funds healthcare. So that's where you get free healthcare in Canada. So
ironic how the alcoholics are funding healthcare in Canada.
Yeah, but it'd be nice if everybody who's smoking pot will also start funding it, and then maybe
then booze will get cheaper.
Wouldn't that be nice?
So that's equivalent to like how Utah does alcohol, basically. The state just runs everything.
Yeah, you can't buy like hard liquor in Utah unless it's at one of those state liquor stores.
I don't know if this is outdated, but I'm showing 23 states and D.C. all have either legal for rec or some form of legal marijuana, with the 4 states we mentioned, Colorado,
Oregon,
Washington, and Alaska being the 4, and DC. So I think this is up to date. So that's so let's see if my math's right. Just under half of the states have.
You're really good at math.
Woo!
Fractions.
All right.
Yeah, I keep derailing Micah, so let's let Micah have his time.
Okay, I'll try really hard. All right. So cannabis is obviously a plant. It's an herb, and it comes in 3 different strains, but only 2 of those 3 strains are consumed for its psychoactive and medicinal properties. So the 2 strains that people use for that are sativa and indica. Cannabis has its psychoactive properties are caused by the numerous cannabinoids that are active in the plant, and THC is the very psychoactive aspect or cannabinoid in the plant that makes you feel high. THC doesn't have a lot of medicinal properties, but our brains have a lot of receptors for THC, and there's lots of interesting suggestions about coevolution between the human species and this really remarkable plant that just produces an enormous amount of THC. And so anyway, but there are also several other am I saying it right? Cannabinoids? Jed?
I have no idea, dude.
Anyway.
Yeah. Cannabinoids is what
Cannabinoids, right. See, it's funny, like I never, you read it, you don't hear a lot of people talk about it. But anyway, so the other cannabinoid that is just so rich with medicinal properties is CBD. And what's interesting is you can go and you can purchase in places where it's legal CBD extract, and CBD doesn't have any psychoactive properties, and so you can take CBD and it's not going to impair you, it's not going to alter your your vision or your reflexes or anything like that. It's purely medicinal. And then I think there's like several dozen other cannabinoids in the different plants. So then let's talk about the different strains. So sativa and indica are the strains, like I said, that people use for getting high and medicinal purposes and stuff like that. And what's so fascinating about these 2 strains is they have very specific aspects in terms of the high that it creates and the effect that it has on your mind and your body. And what's remarkable is how these strains can be crossbred with each other to create an enormous amount of different hybrid strains that each have, specific uses. And so, like for me, I have my medical card. I can go to the dispensary and talk to one of the employees there and ask them, well, I'm looking for something that is going to not make me feel paranoid, but is still going to not put me in the couch, you know? And so sativa is the more creative, social, hyper strain, but it also comes with it can come with a sharp edge of anxiety and paranoia. And that's kind of the stereotypical thing that people talk about with weed, is that it makes you paranoid, right? Indica is, they always say indica in the couch. And indica is what's going to make you feel super relaxed. It's really good to take at night before you go to sleep because you get amazing sleep using an indica. And so if you see somebody who's like really high on an indica strain, they're usually just either asleep or just totally, slumped on a couch somewhere.
And there's a whole mixture of cannabinoids, like Micah was saying. So there's like CBN is another. There's CBG, and some people think that the difference in the way each strain makes you feel is a mixture of all those, not only just the THC. It's like and a lot of people now they're talking about terpenes too, and I'm sure Michael will talk about that later. But
I don't. Yeah, maybe not.
Louis C.K. has this great bit where he talked about back when he was a teenager in the 70s and early 80s, and like he would take these huge hits. And I'll admit, I smoked marijuana when I was in high school, and I would take these huge hits. But then Louis C.K. goes on to say, I didn't realize they were working on this shit like it was the cure for cancer. And so he did a gig in Kansas City where all these younger kids talked him into standing in a circle outside, and he took a hit like he did in the 70s, and he went boom,
Yeah, just got totally fucked up from it, right?
Totally fucked up. So, have they been working on the purity over the last 25 years? What's the difference between when I was in high school and now?
So what has happened is, since THC is what gets you super high, over the past 25 years, what they've done is basically, breed out the CBD and a lot of the other cannabinoids in favor of THC. So now you have strains that, that maybe back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s would only have a THC potency of 15% probably. But now, and what's great about going to the dispensaries is you can, they tell you exactly how much THC is in the strain that you're buying and how much CBD and stuff like that.
Well, it's kind of like getting, the proof for your alcohol you're buying.
True. Yeah. It's fascinating. So now the strains that are on the market are heavy in THC. And so that's why you get so much more high off of the cannabis that the dispensaries and even a lot of the stuff on the street has really high amount of THC. I actually was watching a documentary where this lady was lamenting that fact. These kids don't understand that there's so many wonderful things in this plant that have been bred out of it. And, she feels bad for, the current generation of cannabis consumers that they don't get to have that old school weed that had more of a balance between the different cannabinoids. But anyway, you want me to talk about the different ways of consuming it?
Yeah. What are the different delivery mechanisms?
So everybody's familiar with smoking marijuana, and that's where you're combusting the... Oh, it's important to talk about what part of the plant you're consuming. You're consuming what is the flower or the bud of the plant, and during the
That's why they call it bud.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's not the leaf, right?
It's not the leaf; it's the bud, and you'll get what are called sugar leaves that that are closer to the bud that'll make it into the final cured product, but really it's about the bud, and the bud is where all the trichomes are, and the trichomes are where all of the THC and the different cannabinoids live. So anyway, when you're combusting all that, it obviously turns into smoke, you inhale it, and then gets into your bloodstream, and that's when you start feeling the THC. But what's interesting about about the other delivery mechanisms is that they don't require you to combust it or light it on fire, and that way you can get a more pure cannabis experience. I think the second most common form people are familiar with is our edibles. And in order to make an edible, though, you have to, before the THC burns, it's a different chemical called THCA. And so when you burn it or vaporize it, it instantly converts the THCA into THC. But if you're going to consume it in an edible, you have to do that first without burning the plant. So what do they call it, Jed? Decarbolizing?
Decarboxylate.
Decarboxylate, yeah, whatever.
Oh,
so
you got to remove the carboxyl group, which is an OH, oxygen, hydrogen.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that shit. But anyway.
Way to go, Mr. Science.
I took organic chemistry twice.
The only chemistry I know is related to stuff like this. But anyway, so before you make the edible, it needs to be infused usually in a fat like oil or something like that, and then they make edibles out of it. And what's great about going to the dispensaries to get your edibles is they have the THC measured out in milligrams. And so you're able to really carefully dose yourself, but people still mess it up all the time. Then there's vaporizing, which is
wait a minute. Go back to the edibles real quick. So I've always heard about brownies. Like that's the old school, 1960s.
Yeah,
pop brownies,
right?
man.
It's gotten a little more involved than that. From what
And so just like what anything you can bake in the kitchen with oil or fat in it is capable of being a marijuana edible. Cookies, brownies. There's actually an emerging culinary fascination with marijuana edibles. So you've got gourmet chefs that are using different infused oils to make gourmet entrees and things like that. It's unbelievable, the selection and the different forms of edibles. And you've got all kinds of different companies that are making these products now. And what's also interesting, just like going to a local coffee shop, they'll have, their own edibles that they make there at the dispensary, And so gummy bears, gummy worms, chocolates, chocolate bars, peach rings, really sugary stuff, suckers.
So this is getting a lot of controversy by the argument that they're targeting or marketing these types of candies to kids. What do you say about that, either Jed or Micah?
I went to a meeting with Coconino County. Actually, they're heading up the packaging of this, and they're trying to make it so you have to do a secondary packaging that's childproof for all edibles. So you'll have your original packaging. Like you're buying Jolly Ranchers or something, and you have to, when you sell that to the patient, you have to go into a secondary, and they have to prove that a child cannot open it within 30 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, it's just like with medication bottles, you have the child-proofing lid, right?
Right.
But to Matt's point, it looks like candy.
Yeah.
It tastes like funky candy. So then. So I think
unlike candy cigarettes, which look like cigarettes,
right,
and blow smoke.
Oh, I remember.
They haven't sold those really for years, right?
I don't think so.
They did to all of us as kids, though.
Yeah. That's right.
Oh yeah, I totally remember that. So then there's where you go into the concentrates, and the processing of this, Jed is going to be much more familiar with, but basically is you're using some kind of extraction process where you are getting the pure oils, natural oils from the plant, just like the doTERRA oils. They're made the exact same way by extracting those oils from the mint or the whatever all that shit is. But anyway, you can do that with the cannabis plant, and you get kind of this thick syrupy extract that you can make lots of different things with, and a lot of times different and that's how dispensaries are able to exactly dose their edibles and things like that, because they're using what is essentially pure, almost pure THC, and you're able to make edibles and things like that out of it. You can also dab.
Well, hold on. So that the oil, the concentrate, that's the vaping that you hear about. With,
so you can vape that. You can,
like that.
So vaporizing. So let's talk about vaporizing, I guess. So I have a tabletop vaporizer, and I love it because it contains a small amount of leaf, and it very slowly and gently heats up the little chamber, and it just has some hoses connected to it, kind of like a hookah, and it's a very mellow, and you get to really taste the plant more, and it's a much more enjoyable experience and it's much easier, obviously, on your lungs, because that's the problem with smoking it is, you're always, and stuff like that. But you can vape those concentrates as well. And then there's dabbing, which is essentially where you are applying some sort of concentrate, some kind of cannabis concentrate to a hot element that's hooked up to a water pipe, usually. And so usually it's like a glass nail that you heat up with a torch, and then you use something you can dab something with, think of like a needle, or, they have special dab tools that look just kind of like the tip of a fountain pen. And you scoop up some of the concentrate and you apply it to the hot element that's above the water pipe, and you dab it, and that's why it's called dabbing. And then as you're inhaling that, it travels through the water in the water pipe and comes up, and it's a really potent, very concentrated, and very powerful way to consume the plant. And so for people like me who have a really high tolerance, and we do want to get really high, that's sometimes the way you want to do it.
All right, so you actually came to a point that I wanted to, or you set me up real well there for wanting to get high. This idea that no, not me wanting to get high.
Go on.
Mike said if you want to get really high, the argument that the real medicinal benefits, or the chemical that provides the most medicinal benefits, is not in the THC that gets you high. And so I've heard the argument that if it truly is medicine, if it's for all these issues, then you shouldn't need the THC portion of it. Just get that out and let's make pills and other things that have the other component. Well, is that valid? Have you
I think
that?
that's technically very true, and if you're looking at it from a biological perspective, the THC is not doing a ton of things biologically. It's not really a very good pain reliever, but there are obvious psychological and therapeutic benefits to the THC being in your system. And what's interesting, as you become more experienced in terms of using cannabis, you start to become very familiar with why you're using it. If I'm having a party over at my house, truth be told, I really just want to get high and hang out and talk with my friends, which is amazing. It's incredible. But like I said, I usually take it every night before bed. I'll take a really strong indica to just help me get knocked out. It's way better for you than an Ambien, and gives you, I think, a better quality sleep than sleep aids do.
And you know what? If it wasn't a fucking Schedule I drug, we could actually do research to test these
exactly.
And instead, we have to rely on research that's done outside the country.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's very true.
We can do it in Canada soon.
Go Canada. Go Canada.
Junior.
Exactly.
America Junior. America Light.
We can do research too.
I didn't know you guys had scientists.
Do you have real scientists in Canada?
They can come and visit us.
All right. Across the border.
We'll just let them come over and visit.
Wow. What are the ailments that marijuana is most commonly either taken for, prescribed for, what have you?
I just had a list pulled up for all of that. Jed, you can take
in
over.
Arizona, it's a vast majority chronic pain. I don't know the percentage. I think it's 80-something% of all patients are chronic pain.
Well, real quick. What's insane about Arizona is, you've got to be really fucked up in order to qualify for medical marijuana, except for the chronic severe pain. And that's something people can fake and stuff like that. But otherwise, it's just cancer, Crohn's disease, and a few other really serious medical conditions that qualify you for it. And then
anxiety, I've heard, right?
A psychological diagnosis for anxiety does not make you eligible for for a card.
PTSD just got added last year.
Yeah.
So.
I know, and that could have changed, but when I first got my card a year and a half ago, which is about how long I've been using it, and so yeah. Anyway, Arizona has really strict laws. The other states, not the other states, but especially the states where it eventually became legal recreationally, had really strict medical marijuana laws, or didn't have as strict medical marijuana laws.
Are you high right now?
I have been slowly getting higher throughout the evening, and I thought that would just kind of be a really good demonstration, maybe, that I don't know. Have I made any sense this whole time?
You've been fine.
Okay, good.
What did you say, decreasingly, John?
Decreasingly, yeah.
Well, I'm taking one for the team here. This is it's science, This is a case study.
I have a question about ointments and lotions and stuff like that, because all my, when I took histology, which is a study of human tissue, what I learned was that the human skin is it is the number one most important part of your immune system. It's really a tremendous barrier to prevent things, getting past it into our bodies. So what is the efficacy, if at all, of these marijuana or THC ointments? Do they penetrate the skin barrier?
What's interesting is that there is now weed lube that you can buy or make. And
lube?
Weed lube, yes.
So in the vagina it could penetrate.
Yes. So the vagina, the different receptors in the vagina are able to carry that right into the bloodstream.
Right.
But with men,
Here we thought we were gonna have to set you up for something here, and you just go right to the vagina,
right to the P and V, man.
We're not talking about steaming it. We're talking about medicating it.
But so in terms of the efficacy, I believe that is where it really is. Doesn't take a lot of imagination to figure out how using it in sex will have an effect on women. But usually you're not, I don't believe you're ever going to get stoned from it. I think it creates a very pleasant sensation, and it relaxes you, and I think can help you have a better orgasm. Sex while you're high is always amazing, both for men and for women. So that's another positive benefit, I guess.
Well, to be balanced to the gay constituency we have, I think it would also in the rectum.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Easily absorbed.
Certainly.
Oh, good.
Good.
John, you are good to go, man. You're good to go.
Oh, good.
That's what I'm here for.
So there is this argument that this whole medical marijuana is just a complete sham. It's just a it's a pretense so that people can just smoke it to get high, and they call it medicine, and they call it all these things. And I will tell you, I had a.
What do you think Percocet does? You get high.
Yeah, it's just such a double standard. I mean,
and I agree with you. There, at some point, we should talk about the comparison between alcohol and.
I've got all those stats queued up, by the way.
Yeah, certainly Percocet, OxyContin, which I guess that's the same thing, isn't it?
They're both opioids, yeah.
Yeah, Vicodin, these things that are so highly addictive that I've taken with surgeries or if I had an injury and I hate them. I'm good for about 1 day, 2 days, and then I think I have a stack of about 4 different prescriptions, full prescriptions that I maybe taken 1 or 2 out of, and then I never take them because I hate the way it feels. I'm so fearful of the addiction, and I've seen real devastation from prescription drug abuse and use. So that's totally fair.
That's a big problem with dentists is opioid abuse.
But what they just get it for themselves, or they're able to because they have access.
Access, yeah. And I'm sure physicians have the same problem.
Sure. But what about that? The idea that why the question, I guess, is should we?
Well, you were asking about the cards and how it's kind of a sham, right?
Should it be should we even buy into that pretense, or should we instead say, no, we think it should just be legal recreationally, and there are maybe some benefits, maybe not, but ultimately it doesn't matter. It's got enough benefits to and a low enough risk to call it legal.
I think that the overall decriminalization argument, the fact that there's just this entire failure of prohibition, the fact that like the criminalization and the incarceration rate in the U.S. is just so out of control, and that actually is so insanely expensive to put everybody in jail for no reason. Yeah. So I think that all of that is all by itself reason enough. But on the other hand, it also has seemed like, like when you talk to people who are in chronic pain, who are able to get relief from marijuana, that all by itself seems like that's also a thing. So I think that politically, it's actually not the minority of people that who are actually in chronic pain who are actually helped by this that are actually that are fueling this whole thing. It's rather the entire recreational portion of it that actually politically is causing change. But I think that all by itself too should be enough, because it's actually completely stupid how much money is being spent putting people in jail for no reason. So
yeah.
Yeah, and what I've seen, I kind of went in when I got into the industry at first. I sort of had that same feeling, like, 80+% chronic pain, right? So I'd go into our retail shop and I would just shadow some of the bud tenders. They call them bud tenders. So I'd shadow them and I would listen, and I'd listen to these people's stories.
I would have gone with like Budristas or something like that.
Yeah, but
like barista. Oh, very good, Matt.
Making change in the industry. But no, I would listen to these stories, and sure, you do get people in there that may or may not have serious problems, but there are a lot of people out there that really help with these, and real people with real problems that this is the only thing that's helped them. So it was interesting to see that for sure, because I went into it thinking that it was not going to be like that, but
what I understand, and I learned this again in the last year, as I'd had clients that would have heroin problems, for example, and they get busted with heroin, and I'd flat out tell them, do you have a card? Why don't you go get a card? And in thinking that that's certainly a lot better than doing freaking heroin, and heroin's made a big it's become the new thing. It's made a comeback, but
you know what? It's not like the lighter and more natural heroin that they had in the 70s.
Just like pot, man.
It's like the medical grade heroin.
They've used technology to make it better, man.
I'm teasing you. I'm sorry.
Not
Go
the
ahead.
same heroin your grandparents
I'm sorry
used.
that I threw you off, Matt. Go ahead.
Well, what I was gonna say is, comparing, marijuana and heroin is one thing, but let's just talk about alcohol. I mean, the fact that alcohol is legal and cannabis isn't is just a complete. I mean, it blows my mind. It doesn't blow my mind because I never knew that before I started looking into using it myself and have used it. But, alcohol is so much worse for you, and so much worse in terms of its impairment.
Well, all the domestic violence and all the traffic deaths a year.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I just I have the stats from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, about total causes of death in the United States, and I think this data is from 2013, and so it goes through, so you got 2.5 or 2.6 million deaths. That seems really low. Anyway, 800,000 from cardiovascular disease, 580,000 from cancer, accidents and motor vehicle deaths, 130,000. So then it goes through like Alzheimer's, diabetes, the flu, drug-induced deaths, which includes both legal and illegal drugs. So you're talking about pharmaceuticals and things like that. That is, I just lost it. Hang on. 46,000. So then it goes through HIV, alcohol-induced deaths, firearm-induced deaths. So firearm deaths are 33,000. Alcohol-induced deaths are 29,000.
What about alcohol-induced firearms deaths?
I don't have that stat on here, but I'm sure somebody can find it, So then it goes down and it combines all illicit drugs combined. But this stat is from 2000, actually. So there were 17,000 deaths in 2000 from all illegal drugs combined. So you're incorporating a vast spectrum of both harmless and harmful drugs. 17,000 deaths. Cannabis, 0. 0 deaths related to cannabis. And so so it's just maddening that all of these very
you don't die from staring at a stain on your wall all night.
That doesn't mean that people don't get admitted to the hospital for tripping out on weed, but that's just all in their head. They just think that they're, about to die or whatever, but that's just because they had too much. But physiologically, there's nothing wrong with them, and so they just kind of help them sober up and then kind of pat them on the ass and send them home. Nobody dies from it.
The other thing about again, the marijuana being a Schedule I drug is they don't have the same studies on like driving, for example. So it certainly is, a person is considered DUI if they have THC, active THC, or even the metabolite, which is not psychoactive. If they have it in their system, it's still a DUI. So you've got a lot of people in Arizona, as long as if they don't have a card, and if they have the metabolite in their system instead of THC. So again, not high, no psychoactive effect. They are charged with and convicted of DUI. So a lot of times people will point to the DUI numbers as a example of see how dangerous marijuana is, but it's a bit of a flaw or a faulty argument, because one, a lot of those people aren't actually feeling the effects of marijuana, but can still be convicted. And then number two, there aren't any studies to say that here's the level that makes a person now unsafe to drive as there is with alcohol. And that's a whole nother topic, because alcohol's crazy. I mean, an 08
or with texting.
Or with texting, yeah, or eating and putting on makeup and shaving. Absolutely.
Are there any developments in that realm, Matt? Do you know?
Well, it's the more that it's becoming legal, both from a medicinal and a recreational standpoint, there's more of a push to it. So, for example, in Arizona, there has been these small shifts in case law that are going in the direction of what alcohol currently is, which is requiring certain levels. So it started, and this may be really pedantic and not interesting, but it started where it was just this carte blanche of, hey, if you have any form of THC or its metabolite in your system, you can't drive. It's your DUI. And then if you had a card and you only had the metabolite, which is the non-psychoactive component, then you could not be charged with DUI. But if you didn't have a card, if you don't have a card, you can be charged with DUI.
What? That doesn't make any sense.
That's the argument, because the point of DUI, the reason that alcohol DUA in '08 is the legal limit is because it is accepted unequivocally that every single human being is impaired at an '08. That's why '08 means something. Now there could be people that are impaired in an '04 or in an '03, but not everyone. That's the magic number of '08. And remember, it used to be 10, and then they scaled it back because they realized that actually every single person is impaired at an '08. Now the similar things are happening with THC or marijuana, where they're trying to find a threshold for where everybody would be considered under the influence or feeling the effects of THC. And right now that level is 2 nanograms per milliliter of blood, which doesn't translate really well to understanding what that means. But it means
they're driving really slow.
And everything they see is interesting.
Even the lines on the highway, you could.
Oh man, I'm going so. Oh man,
why is this taking so long?
Trees are awesome.
Well, what's interesting is I was representing a victim. Actually it was the victim's family in a vehicular homicide case, and was sitting through the trial, and the expert, the chemical expert, came on to talk about the impact of THC on driving, and he basically said, no, it's there really aren't very good studies to indicate that it has an impact on driving, because it doesn't. The problem with alcohol, the reason why alcohol is so dangerous, is because it impacts divided attention tasks, and that's you can see something, see a sign, and react with both your hands and your feet together, and it kind of eliminates that. Whereas they said with THC, if I'm remembering this right, and I could be getting this off just a little bit, but I'll say it anyway, is that it doesn't impact reaction time, but it impacts depth perception or something like that. But it doesn't impact the divided attention task the way that alcohol does. So the question was, well, so then somebody's safer driving with THC than alcohol, and this expert said, we don't have studies to support that.
Wow.
So he wouldn't answer it, but he wouldn't say that it is.
He wouldn't bring it home. He couldn't.
Well, that's the responsible answer to give,
right,
in his position. But the lack of depth perception is made up for the lack of speed you're traveling at.
One thing we definitely need to touch upon is sort of some of the, even though I'm a huge proponent for cannabis consumption, there are, some things that need to be considered. And really, what it comes down to is kids. Before your frontal lobe is fully developed in your early to mid or sometimes late 20s, it can have permanent effects on neurological development. It can have long-term effects on memory and things like that. Once your frontal lobe is fully developed, there are no noticeable long-term cognitive effects from cannabis use. When you go to, I got this link pulled up here, drugfacts.org or drugabuse.gov, sorry. Here are the really dangerous things it lists from medical for any kind of cannabis use. Hang on, where is it? It broke it down to short-term effects, altered senses, altered sense of time, changes in mood, impaired body movement, difficulty with thinking and problem solving, impaired memory. So this is those are the negative side effects from this plant, and it's a Schedule I substance.
But you said those are short-term effects.
But those are short-term effects. So those are the effects that are in place while the high is taking place. It's not the long-term effects. While you're high, you experience these.
You're like, oh,
yeah.
It's only then.
And there are other things like it increases your heart rate, It does, like I said, certain strains will make you feel paranoid or anxious. But for the most part, it's just fucking awesome. So
I have a question. This is something I think a stoner told me in high school once. So, John, you're our quality control on bullshit. I heard that William Hearst, the father of yellow journalism, was behind the illegalization legislation of marijuana because hemp was, at the time, in his mind, posed a threat to paper.
I did just read an article about that, and yeah, up until the early 1900s, hemp was a very common writing surface, and so, you always hear what is actually true, which is that George Washington, he was a hemp farmer, and hemp was, a really important crop in the South, and they grew a lot of it along with cotton. As cotton became more of a standard fabric, especially after the cotton gin and things like that, then it became a much more common crop. But yeah, I read that article. I read an article about William Randolph Hearst, and that he was trying to do that. I also read the same thing about the trolley cars. Oh, sorry, I'm going on a tangent. I'm going on a high tangent. Sorry, that the oil companies destroyed all the electric trolley cars. Anyway, sorry.
So there's actually something to what the stoner told me in high school. That's interesting.
Well, I probably saw it on Facebook, so who the hell knows if it's.
I think Joe Rogan pushes that.
Maybe it was a Joe Rogan thing. Actually, yeah. You know what? I believe that's. Yeah, I think that's where I heard it was Joe Rogan.
I've seen that shared around, and I think Cypress Hill had a little bit on that too, if I remember right from high school. But those are my sources: Joe Rogan and Cypress Hill.
Well, you guys know where the term yellow journalism comes from, right?
Yeah, it's from Hearst.
Well, Hearst uses really crappy, cheap yellow paper to print his sensational. Basically, it was the National Enquirer of the 20s, 30s, 40s.
But yeah. I don't. Who knows if that's what caused the whole thing? I mean, the thing is that it had happened in the 19th century with the rise of opiates like lanolin. Were that there was a new thing that happened with where Western science had encountered drugs like cocaine and Coca-Cola and lanolin which is an opiate in just basic medicine, and also as opposed to George Washington, who may or may not have understood all of the exciting properties of his hemp farm. In other words, when they started to discover all those things, what were that people pulled back to what Western civilization had always had as the drug of choice, which is alcohol, and that even that was prohibited, during Prohibition, but everything else, was prohibited much more. So,
1919 to 1933.
Yeah,
I love the Simpsons episode on Prohibition. Where
that's great.
They went back and looked closer at the books, and they installed Prohibition, and one day later rescinded it.
Yeah, they blew off the charter and said, "Oh, it turns out that this law was rescinded the year later."
That's when that's when they used catapulting as a punishment for.
That's right. And then it's like, and Chief Wiggum was like, "Look at this one. The constables shall be given one one lovely lass." Buxom.
Talk about the Simpsons tangent. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So it does. I want to go back to the medicinal properties because it does trip me out that you can't go to your doctor, like a medical doctor or a DO, and get a prescription for it and have them recommend it for you. You have to go to a voodoo shaman, basically, a naturopathic doctor, or someone else. The person.
Are you fucking serious?
Yeah. It's about, I think 10% of MDs do do prescribe it, but yeah, like 80+% of all recommendations in Arizona are naturopaths or homeopaths.
No, those are just adults dressing up like doctors and
Right.
playing doctor.
Hey,
Calm
calm down now.
Offends me,
My
Randy,
doctor gave me a very thorough examination, and she was a naturopathic doctor. So,
She's not
I think
a doctor. She's a fucking. She's someone
Sir.
dressing up and playing
Sir.
like a doctor. She's a naturopath. It's a pseudoscience.
and they hold the keys to this kingdom, which just seems bizarre to me.
Well, that's why I'm okay with it. So
I think part of the reason, though, is there's always a reason for it. But the federal government, I think, has some sort of control over their ability to prescribe medicine. So, but the federal government doesn't have any control over naturopaths. That's how I understand it.
It's just like with the supplement industry. There's like the FDA doesn't do anything to regulate that. So they can make any claims they want. But the pharmaceutical industry, they got to spend billions on R&D and to get approval through the FDA before they can even put anything out.
So you get like ephedra, which is like killing people.
Yes.
It's like, oh, boo-hoo, pharmaceutical industry. Oh, they had to spend all those billions. They can't get it back.
Okay, I'm not saying the pharmaceutical industry is the is like squeaky clean and
No, I know.
and without any fault, but
I know.
Aren't you disturbed by the lack of regulation for homeopathic bullshit?
Of course, I would never buy things from the supplement industry.
And by the way, guess what herbs are? Herbs are drugs. They're just not controlled for the active ingredient.
Right.
And study after study has shown that the supplemental industry, because they're not regulated, when they test what's actually in your ginkgo biloba, it's not ginkgo biloba. It's
oregano.
Yeah, right.
If you wish.
I love Randy talking about.
That actually makes sense about the that federal theory, because a lot of people don't realize this, but none of these dispensaries can bank.
Yeah,
because all banks are controlled by or regulated by the FDIC, right? Or by the federal, I don't know. What do I know? Anyway,
Yep.
And so they're all cash only or ATM transaction businesses, and so they can't even bank. And so that kind of makes sense that the unregulated naturopathic practitioners are the ones that are able to endorse these applications. That is funny.
But all that stuff. I mean, once one of these social changes starts to happen, and it happens through kind of the states, and everything starts to flip. It only takes a certain number of years, and they've done studies about which, like everything from abortion to the gay marriage to everything else. We're not very far away from this just flipping in the U.S., so it's probably the federal government won't be
John,
too far behind it. Yeah.
John, can you speak to the reason why the religious right takes this issue as part of its platform and agenda?
Because I honestly think that the whole thing is because this isn't part of Western civilization. So in the exact same way that the word of wisdom is actually based on like a very serious uncomfortableness with coffee and tea, which are like Turkish and Chinese. In other words, it's something like, it's not that's part of Western European history. And so people brought it in and they're like, wait a second, this is very scary stuff, and it's foreign. And so that's why there is this kind of natural health thing that Joseph Smith puts forward. In that same regard, there is a line between the kind of like the alcohol / pot line that happens in Asia, in the middle of Asia somewhere. And so this kind of stuff isn't something that has been traditional in the West. And so that's why conservatives don't like it. But there's no particular reason for it. It like a lot of people pointed out, the high is less impairing than the high that you get from alcohol, which is relatively accepted within the Western and Christian tradition. So,
Kind of the
whereas
teetotalers.
Muslims don't like alcohol, and,
Right.
and you can smoke pot.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's where the line is.
Ah.
That's why it's on the other side of the line.
Well, and if
What do you think
very-
hashish is? You know,
If religion is the opiate of the masses, I know I got that wrong, Randy.
That's not what he said.
I know that's not what he said.
Okay.
it's a colloquialism, but if it is, then why would they want to compete with other substances that actually have effect? I don't know.
So meth is the what of the masses.
Yeah, what he said
Anyway.
was much better.
So did you guys you see there on the Skype thing? I sent you all a link. On
Yes.
The,
Yeah.
So I thought this was interesting. This was starting to go around Facebook. Actually, Glenn sent it, and then I started seeing it shared around Facebook. But it's on a blog, lds-church-history.blogspot.com, and this is History of Word of Wisdom, March 17th, 1884. And I thought this was
the Talmud story. Huh?
this is really funny.
Yeah, it's pretty short. We should do a quick. We'll do a paragraph by paragraph quick smackdown. It won't take long. So this says History of the Word of Wisdom, March 17th, 1884. Future Apostle James E. Talmage at Johns Hopkins University writes in his journal, March 17th. I've been engaged some time in the study of the effects of narcotics upon the system, i.e. studying the same theoretically only. Today, I found a gentleman who works in the same laboratory as I and who has for 2 years been addicted to the habit of eating hashish, or extract of cannabis indica. He was very willing to give me any data from his own experience and gave me such. 5 days later, he includes himself as a subject by taking cannabis indica himself.
March 22nd, 1884. So this is 5 days later. James E. Talmage begins using hashish at Johns Hopkins University as my quote, my physiological experiment, end quote, of its effects. He takes 3 doses of 5 grains each every hour, quote, solid extract cannabis indica, end quote. By April 6th, he is using 20, so many damn quotes. By April 6th, he is using 20 grains of, quote, and the effect was felt in a not very agreeable way, end quote. Nevertheless, he intends to, quote, bury the trial in the future, end quote. This is the last reference in Talmage's diary to using narcotics. 4 months later, he becomes member of Stake High Council. So,
Here,
it
I wanna
doesn't
read-
really.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, he just all that paragraph says is that it didn't go well.
Just
Well, it ties into the March 23rd one. Can I read that? Can we skip
Yeah,
the? Okay. The day after he took 3 doses, 5 grains each of hashish, cannabis indica, James E. Talmage writes in his journal, quote, Sunday, spent quietly. Have had no result to be noted of my physiological experiment yesterday. I do not feel inclined to try it again until the end of next week, as the realization of the effects of the drug are not desirable on working days.
That's awesome. Undesirable urge to eat many pork rinds.
Spent quietly. What a great sentence. I think that should be a band name. Spent quietly.
Sitting in his parlor, just staring at the wall.
He was probably reading the scriptures and loving it.
Right. And then then April 5th, 1884, he said, this evening, at first opportunity which has presented itself, I attempted my experiment on the effects of hashish as referred to March 22nd. Took all 15 grains, no effects.
Is a grain a unit of measure? What is that? Like a lid or something? What
No
is
idea.
Yeah, a grain.
Maybe it's similar to the Book of Mormon measurements. What are they? A sinine and a...
A synod, yeah.
I don't remember all of them, but I used to.
This is the current drug lingo of 1880s Baltimore.
It's like a dime bag.
Yeah, an 8.
Oh, there you go. So James Talmage at least experimented a little bit, although he didn't seem to
He didn't like it.
Except for the one Sunday seemed to be.
He seemed okay
Sunday
on
seemed to be okay. Work days, not so much. Not so desirable.
Not quite as effective on work days. Yeah. Hey, Jed.
Yep.
So if you can't bank, how do you run the business?
That's a great question. So we do as much cash as we can. So we have a payroll company, but we pay our employees cash, and then we run their payroll through that. So that's a big one. We actually do have a bank account, but and there's only a couple in town that will take it. They have to be smaller banks.
You can't tell us if it's M&I or if it's.
I would tell you that every dispensary would go attack our place and go, give us one. Well,
the one thing I know about banks, because we get cash payments in my orthodontic practice, and I had to open an account where we would put the cash into, and they, of course, the first thing banks are worried about is money laundering.
Yeah.
So they really scrutinize you at first, but once you become a regular customer, they understand that you're going to bring cash every week. All the time.
And so we just keep our deposits into the bank relatively low, and we buy. See, the industry is it's a standard now. I mean, you just buy all your wholesale product with cash, and it's not good. That's for sure. I mean, it's a nightmare.
And there's I did watch the Netflix documentary. Was it High Times or
what's the one in Breckenridge?
Yeah, the one in Colorado there, Breckenridge.
Hey, that's where we go to Vail, dude. It's close to.
Nice.
Oh yeah. Anyway, I forget what it's called, but I watched that, and that was a big piece of it. Is how worried they were handling all types of cash. Everybody knows that they only handle cash, and what a target that they felt that they were for robberies and those things, and how really the laws were unsafe, and if they wanted to facilitate safety and security and those things, that they should at least allow the banks to, if it's going to be a legal enterprise, that it should be allowed to bank, and that could be another step that the federal government could do immediately, is just say yes. And
if they dropped it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2, then that would probably happen pretty quickly. And I'm actually surprised that we haven't had more issues in the Arizona market than we have. I've only heard of one place that's actually gotten robbed. So we haven't had any problems. And I'm actually surprised.
Yeah. So the reason we're ultimately doing this conversation, or why I wanted to talk about it, was it's certainly relevant, but related to Mormonism. Utah just came out, or one of the senators, what's his name? Madsen? Is that his name?
Madsen, yep.
Such a Mormon name.
Yeah. He came out and to propose a medical marijuana law for Utah that you said, Jed, is very similar to Arizona's, is your understanding?
It's very similar, yeah. I mean, except there would actually be fewer dispensaries. I think it's one dispensary per 200,000 residents. So it's like in the entire Salt Lake Valley, there'd be like 5 or 6 dispensaries. So they're even more conservative than.
Well, and that was an interesting thing of that documentary, is they kind of talk about how these laws and being real restrictive have created these monopolies in some cases, that you can't really let free market take over because there's just not enough licenses to go around. Although it sure seems like there's a lot here in Arizona. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's your sense, Jed?
So there's 130 licenses given out. It's 10% of the liquor licenses. So
is that what it's tied to the liquor licenses?
Yeah, and
so if they give another 10 liquor licenses, then you can get another one dispensary.
One more dispensary.
Interesting.
Would be, one license would be released through the Arizona Department of Health Services.
What would the fight be for that? I mean, would there be like a scramble?
Oh yeah, well no, it's a lottery. I believe it's a lottery from here. I know it was originally a lottery. I've not looked into getting any ones that have come out, but I mean once a license goes into receivership and litigation happens, that license a lot of time ends up back in there too. So they reassign that to someone. But yeah, there's about 100 of us open in Arizona, so it sure feels like there's a lot. But Arizona, the way they did it was, the way we did it was, they created these sections of town where it was a monopoly, right? It was just you're allowed to be here only, you're allowed to be here only, and they just split up the state, and that's where the 130, however many there were. But yeah, but that ended about 6 months ago. So any dispensary can move to any part of town now. So,
but the fight is still there for the license, but now you can go as long as it's zoned for
right. Yep.
Retail or commercial or whatever. You're good to go.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And there are other restrictions like not being so close to
schools.
school.
Yep, it's a quarter mile from. Well, actually, each city is different, but like Tempe is a quarter mile from schools, churches, and
churches, right? Because
yeah.
I told you, man.
Church people are so susceptible.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh no,
Think of the
not
children.
a 70-year-old church lady. She's like, oh, there's marijuana. I mean, what?
So this Mattson came out with a medical marijuana law, or at least a Senate bill, and like immediately the church came out formally, and so this was on February 6th, so just a couple days ago, and they confirmed that they have expressed opposition to a Utah state legislative bill that would legalize access to the entirety of the marijuana plant for those suffering from a limited number of medical conditions. And they cite the, quote, unintended consequences of this bill. And it's proposed by a Republican, State Senator Mark Madsen.
He is active LDS as well. So
Mark Madsen, not the former Laker, who is also Mormon.
So what's the church's agenda here? Why such a motivation to come out on this one?
I think part of it is because there's the second bill that's going to be proposed here, and from my insider guy in Utah, he told me that it was a bishop who saw that the bill only failed. Madsen's bill in 2015 only failed by one vote. So this bishop saw that and said, "Whoa, I better write one for the next time, so mine passes and not his." So this is sort of my theory of the whole thing, but so it's possible that's why, because there's an opposing bill which would only allow for the CBD part of the, like Micah was saying, non-psychoactive part of the plant. So
that's no fun.
Yeah.
Well, and I think they say that specifically in here. They say there's a number of potential impacts that must be considered in any discussion about the legalization of medical marijuana, including balancing medical needs with the necessity of responsible controls. Along with others, we've expressed concern about the unintended consequences that may accompany the legalization of medical marijuana. We have expressed opposition to Senator Madsen's bill because of that concern. Because then they talk about how they ask, he goes to him specifically, that is Madsen, and says, well, let's have a discussion about this. What are your concerns? And they didn't really answer it, and he just says, is it THC? And they nod and say, basically say yes. They're concerned with people getting high.
Nobody can have fun.
It does feel a bit like that, huh?
It's like Footloose, man.
Yeah.
And from what I understood, it was 60% or something of the Senate, they're active LDS. So that'd probably just killed that bill.
I'm interested in this line. He says, they're concerned with the unintended consequences, but then they can't really articulate them. So they might as well have said the unknowable consequences. It really feels like there's, and I hear this all the time, this idea that it's a given. Well, he smoked weed, or, hey, he was high, as if that means something without really understanding what it is. And again, my eyes have been opened over the last couple of years as I've encountered a number of friends who have gotten their cards and use very responsibly, and so it has at least changed my perspective. Maybe not enough to use in order to to consume it at this point. But it certainly doesn't seem to be the evil that it was portrayed when we were kids and the Nancy Reagan, the Just Say No campaign came out.
And that's kind of the image I think the Mormons have, is that it's this really dangerous drug that's going to cause people to commit crime. And it's just, there's nothing to back that up.
It just makes you love everybody. I don't know why you would want to
What's this?
hurt
Is
people.
every one of the Mormon leaders, when they were like right around 40 or 50 or 60 in 1936, they saw the movie Reefer Madness. And they decided, everything will happen.
Well, there's also the counterculture movement. Mormonism kind of got dyed in the wool as far as its culture is concerned, and with the counterculture movement. I think that they associated, hippies and communism with marijuana, and I think that shapes a lot of the opinions today on the Mormon mind on marijuana. I don't know. Do you guys agree or think that's off base?
No, that's when they started, having people not like no facial hair at BYU. That was like a hippie thing. Yeah.
The whole thing is based on that.
Is there another state that even comes close to paralleling one church controlling the government like Utah?
No. It's the only one.
It's incredible. Sorry to our libertarian conservatives out there.
No, that is a good point, Randy. I mean, you would think there'd be a little more libertarians in Utah that would be all about freedoms and that. It just doesn't seem to play out.
That's why I didn't say the right wing. I said the religious right. They're the ones that have a problem. Like, libertarians are all about legalizing marijuana, ending this ridiculous war on drugs that's racist and wasteful and pointless.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It hasn't done anything.
I don't know. That's all I had to say about marijuana. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's really an LDS issue or not, but
I think we got a solid hour and a half out of this.
That's what I'm looking at here. So
yeah,
at least.
Even with Micah getting high.
That was the best part. Actually,
I'm in the quiet stage of my high now. I'm just I
take it back. James E. Talmadge getting high was the best part.
I agree. That was
awesome too.
That was delightful.
Well, just like I think gay marriage and everything, this is something that's changing very quickly. Obviously, the last few years have just been crazy how quickly it's happened. So there's it's inevitable. So I think people should just get their head around it and put in some protection. If you want to protect kids, and I'm totally supportive of obviously restricting it to kids and not driving with it and those types of things. But I've read the writing on the wall and been a proponent for a number of years now. It doesn't seem to make sense. No one that argues for why it should be illegal, their points aren't persuasive. Well, let me bring it to this. What about the idea of it being a gateway drug? Is there any evidence of that?
No.
I want to push back a little bit on the idea that it's not a gateway drug because, and this is completely anecdotal, is I've talked to enough friends who did start with marijuana and now have tried, sampled other things.
But I think that's because of that's the don't say no policy that actually lumps the damn things together. Because in a lot of ways, there literally should be for people a difference between, like eating a gummy bear and taking like wrapping a thing around your arm, taking a syringe and shooting up. You know what I mean? I mean, I feel like that there's like a big, like a threshold.
Yeah, there's a huge disparity. Yeah. Well, I think, and people have to realize that, and we didn't talk earlier much about addiction, cannabis addiction, but, despite the myth cannabis does have, a dependency ratio, but it's even smaller than chocolate, and you compare that to alcohol. But yeah, I think
what's with the alcohol?
I think cannabis.
Alcohol is not the problem.
Well, I'm just talking about. I'm talking about the.
People already.
No. I'm talking about the potential for abuse. I'm talking about the potential for abuse, and I think that's why alcohol is such a good, comparison, because
there's so many people drinking.
Well, and plus the comparison of prohibition with alcohol.
Right.
There's just so many correlations. But yeah, I do think cannabis can be a gateway drug to psychedelics, which are completely non-addictive. Because I think when you have positive experiences with cannabis, it kind of opens your mind, like, this is not evil. This isn't. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing bad about this. What else have I been wrong about? And so I think that does leave people open to different things, but hopefully they're not open to things that can lead to legitimate substance abuse and with things like meth and opiates and cocaine and things like that, which are all very highly addictive. So anyway,
here's where I think the myth comes from, though, is if you're the kind of person that takes heroin, there's probably a pretty goddamn good chance you tried marijuana at some point.
Right.
And so there's a correlation, but not a causation that's been established. But if you then did a study, you would find that a very low percentage of people that have ever tried marijuana tried heroin or cocaine.
Right.
Yeah, so go forward rather than backwards.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's also an accessibility issue too, right? So if you go to buy illegally, you go to your dealer and he's got pot, well, what else you got? That type thing,
Right.
So
getting it off the streets will dramatically help with that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we proved that marijuana is not a gateway drug, at least in this podcast, because we started with an episode on mushrooms before we ever did.
Oh,
yeah. See?
Well, that's why I'm the one that pitched this to Matt. I'm like, dude, you guys did mushrooms before weed. How come you haven't done an episode on weed? Come on.
Our bad. Although weed was shown in a glowing light by Space Cowboy, it took him from like crippling depression to Leonardo DiCaprio on the front of the Titanic.
Well, and honestly, speaking from experience, going through a faith transition, completely deconstructing all your entire belief system, and all the baggage that comes along with it. It's good medicine for that. Cannabis is.
My baby, she won't let me in. I've got a few pennies. I'm gonna buy myself a bottle of gin, and then I'm gonna call my buddy on the telephone. Say,
hi, this is Micah Nickolaisen from Mesa, Arizona. And I steal light from Kolob while listening to Infants on Thrones.
so hard.
You can comment on this episode on the website infantsonthrones.com. And if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes. I did. Anyone for the closing prayer?
I want to stop by on my way home and say,
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.